This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas Coffee, a family tradition since 1897. Online at papanicholas.com.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. We've brought you the story of Prisha Mosley before, and we're going to bring it to you again because the dividing line couldn't be more clear. In North Carolina, the Republican-controlled legislature voted to override Democrat Governor Roy Cooper's veto of 3 bills this week, including one that protects children from life-altering gender transition surgeries performed under the guise of affirmation. So I could be more clear. I know a lot of focus on sports, but with respect to minors, Republicans, generally speaking, are on the side of parents and protecting children. And Democrats like Roy Cooper are on the side of the identitarian mob. People like Rachel Levine, who was running around Alaska earlier this month talking about egg producers. That's his new name for women, egg producers.
Seriously?
Egg producer. That's what we're going to start calling women now.
At CPS, we're not parents. We're birthing people.
Obviously.
By the way.
Yeah.
Got that memo.
Some are egg producers and some are not, although, you know, we're talking about uterus transplants now. Maybe we'll be getting to ovary transplants before you know it. Anything so that trans can have the authentic experience. Men can have the authentic experience, I should say. You don't have to do the butt babies. You can actually have guys with beards walking around pregnant. Okay, well, back to North Carolina, because Prisha Mosley is from North Carolina. So here's a real-world illustration of what we're talking about and where the fault line is. This is what Prisha Mosley posted a while back about what happened to her as a teenage girl. She's now a young woman.
I can't believe this happened. I ruined my life. When you break it down, I decided that I didn't want to be a woman before I had ever even experienced being a woman. I had no idea what being a woman was like because I was a child. And now I feel like I will never entirely know. I want to say that I really feel like some people in the trans community and the trans medicalists and the doctors really, really target the most vulnerable of us. I have borderline personality disorder, and I know for a fact that this is the reason for my transition. It's a very difficult mental illness, and one of the core features is not having any sense of self or identity. And my doctors knew this. I told them, even though they didn't ask, that I had been diagnosed with BPD, and it was all fine to them. I wasn't happy as a girl, so that meant I was a boy and I was trans. And so I just took the cure that was handed to me. I was told that I was being given a cure, and I wouldn't want to kill myself anymore. And it wasn't true. I didn't want to cry in this video, but this is such a hard thing to talk about. I lost a lot of things to this, and I just hope that anyone else who's going through what I went through as a young girl will not be prescribed hormones and surgery because of other things. You know, there are so many mental health disorders that make you hate your body, and the solution isn't to change your body, it's to fix your brain, you know? I just don't want anyone else to ever feel this way. I lost my voice, I lost my chest. I don't know if I'm going to be able to have kids. I feel like no one wants to date me or love me because I'm ruined.
It's tough stuff, but you have to confront the reality of this. And by the way, Prisha Mosley is now suing some of those doctors she mentioned that fast-tracked her to this ruination she describes.
And currently, to date, there's about 300 women or children, minors, who've had the top surgery done.
The point here too is that people like Prisha Mosley don't get any attention from sort of the larger culture, counterculturalists like us in the modern context, but from the larger culture, they are silenced. There's an intent to sideline the Prisha Mosleys and the Chloe Coles from telling their stories, and that's not right. And there's a desire to forget, to not address negative outcomes, and that is also with respect to school shooters even. That's how powerful the identitarian political outfit is. For more on that, we're pleased to be joined by Glenn Reynolds. He's the Beauchamp Brogan Distinguished Professor of Law at the University of Tennessee. Excuse me, College of Law. Tennessee. I don't want to say Tennessee. That's a crime there. Instapundit. Also, Glenn Reynolds is Instapundit. If you follow that blog, which you should, great resource. And author of The Social Media Upheaval, Professor Glenn Reynolds. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So you wrote recently about that manifesto we're still waiting for. The police in Nashville sort of said, we not going to release it right now. We may release it, but there was always sort of the feeling that they weren't going to release it. And we're talking, of course, about the Covenant school shooter. And because that shooter was trans, we're not getting that shooter's musings in a way that is very different had that shooter been, for example, a Trump supporter.
Oh, there's no question that if this had been a Baptist Trump supporter who shot up a trans center or something, they would have put out everything they could as quickly as they could and then used it to blame everybody else who was a Trump supporter or a Baptist or whatever for this action, because that's what they do. And the reason why they're not releasing it now is that they don't want it done to them. The Audrey Hale story is interesting. She was not a student at the school. She was an alumnus. She'd been out for 10 years, roughly. Her mother was a big gun control activist. She was able to purchase firearms legally because her mental condition was concealed. It's now the stuff just isn't coming out. They promised they'd get it out soon. Initially, there was a big uproar from some LGBT plus groups that it might make trans people look bad, and as a result, it's just never come out. And there was a certain amount of attention to that at the time, and now it's kind of faded. But on Monday, we have a special session of the Tennessee legislature called by the governor because of that shooting, and the legislature is going to vote on proposals for mental health and gun control and all sorts of stuff, but in complete ignorance of what actually motivated the shooter whose actual shooting was the reason for the special session at all.
Yeah, I mean, so is there any effort by the by political leaders, the legislature, the governor, to intercede specifically on this issue of providing this information to the public, making this information that's in the hands of law enforcement public record?
A lot of legislators have called for this. There were some, in fact, who said they wouldn't support a special session if it weren't released. I think about 66, I believe was the number, issued a statement calling for the release. Governor Bill Lee, in a somewhat more muted fashion, has called for it to be released, but it's under the control of the Metro Nashville Police Department and the FBI, and they're just not talking.
Well, what do you know about Audrey Hale? Like, how long was she identifying as a man or for female to male transgender transformation? Do you know?
I really don't. It had been, she had a history of mental issues going back prior to the trans thing, and had identified as trans for some time, but I haven't seen anything that said exactly when that happened.
Well, the other thing, too, is this is also muted, of course, is that so this is one of a half a dozen incidents, shootings, violent attacks over the last 4 or 5 years that involve people who identify as something other than their biological gender. And, you know, again, the argument that you have, actually you just heard from Pisha Mosley, when you hate your body, you don't change your body, you change your mind. The idea that we have people with mental conditions, and obviously not every trans person identifies as something other than biological sex, commits a crime. I get it, but it's not even part of the conversation where we otherwise would talk about particular ideologies radicalizing some who are subscribed to it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's important to kind of draw a distinction, too. I mean, trans people, plenty of them are fine. I know some myself. Trans activists are basically garbage people. I'm sorry. They're just horrible. They frequently speak violently. They want to silence anybody who disagrees with them. They are speaking from a place of fundamentally, I think, mental illness, and are acting out. And they're just not good people. And yet they are treated as if they are some sort of superior moral voice in the national conversation. Media people defer to them, take guidance on how to cover things from them, use their messaging, because they're somehow seen as some sort of morally superior liberation movement. And they're just not. They're just not.
Yeah. Well said. Tennessee specifically, the two legislators in particular that were expelled, who became cause celebs, calling for gun control after this Covenant school shooting, Justin Pearson and Justin Jones. So that was a nice cover they provided for these substantive issues we're discussing to, make themselves spectacles as they did. I wonder, so where is that at? Where are those two at? Where is that at? I don't really understand these legislators, running interference for an investigation into what actually happened and an understanding of what actually happened and what perhaps some of the motives were with respect to that shooting.
Well, they've both been reelected in special elections. Their constituents supported them, which is not at all surprising when you consider their districts. I personally, I'm not the legislative leadership, but I would have just given them a terrible office and a worse parking place and take them off all their committees. That's usually how you deal with that sort of thing. But, the truth is, the reason why we don't know what happened is because the powers that be don't want us to know what happened. And the reason they don't want us to know what happened is that they think we would think and act differently if we did. And they don't want us thinking and acting that way. That's why they're keeping us in the dark. There's no mystery here as to what's going on. We may not know what happened exactly, what was in the shooter's mind and all of that, but we have a really good idea what's in the mind of the authorities as they do this kind of thing.
Well, they must know something we don't. I'm sorry for interrupting, but they must know something that we don't know.
Yeah, I think that's right. Something that they don't want us to know.
Right. Interesting, though, just those two black legislators. If this was a shooting that took the lives of black individuals, you think they would be content with anything being withheld from the public that provides an understanding of motive or other details?
Of course not. And for that matter, if they were white legislators trying to block an investigation with the races reversed, they'd all be called racist.
Correct.
And if they were expelled, everybody would be approving it. So, that's just how politics work in America now. There's a huge double standard. And this is just another example of that. And it's caused, there is a double standard because they can get away with it. And they can get away with it because the media is dominated by the left and Democratic messaging. And nowadays even sees itself as primarily an organ of Democratic messaging. They don't even pretend very hard to be independent now. They kind of brag on their role.
You're a law professor. Is there anything that Governor Lee or Tennessee Republicans could have done that they have not done under the law to provide transparency here?
That's an interesting question. Tennessee is not a state with an especially strong governor. And I don't think the governor has a lot of power over Metro Nashville police directly. The legislature has some really big hammers it could bring if it wanted to. I mean, it could dissolve the metropolitan government in Nashville and create a new one, but that's not likely to happen over something like this. So it's interesting to me to see that. Also, I think there's a lot of people in the Republican side on the right who would just as soon let this sleeping dog lie because they're afraid if everybody knows what happened, people will want them to do something, and they'd rather not have to do that.
Well, this is the point I was getting to. I mean, it's this classic situation where the left will exercise power it does not legitimately have, and the right won't exercise power it does legitimately have, and then we wonder why we have the cultural rot that we have.
Well, that's exactly right. And, one of the things, the mystery factor in a lot of American politics and why people on the right tend to be so squishy is basically tribal loyalty. People on the right belong to this sort of educated gentry class for the most part, too. Everybody in government kind of does. And they care about the opinion of their peers more than they care about the opinion of their constituents to a large degree.
Mm. Glenn Reynolds is the Beauchamp broke.
Snub them at the country club.
Yeah, well, I hear you. We know that all too well in Chicagoland. Glenn Reynolds is the Beauchamp Brogan Distinguished Professor of Law at the University of Tennessee College of Law. And, of course, he is Instapundit. Check that out every day, every hour. Also the author of The Social Media Upheaval. Glenn Reynolds, thanks so much for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
You've heard Remke's Garage commercials on AM 560, and now they specialize in servicing Sprinters and light-duty diesels. But the experts at Remke's also service Isuzu and Chevy low-cab forward trucks. So if you own an Isuzu or Chevy low-cab forward truck but aren't sure where to get it repaired, take it to Remke's Garage, your #1 dealer alternative for repairs to your Isuzu NPR, Isuzu F-Series, or Chevy low-cab forward truck. Whether gas or diesel, your truck is the lifeline of your business. That's why Remke's Garage offers free loaners while your truck is being serviced. They'll even pick up and deliver for your convenience. Remke's Garage has the factory scan tool to properly diagnose Isuzu and Chevy